Open Silo Garden Party. This is a series of conversations with the people in the food and urban agriculture community in Los Angeles and beyond. I am your host, Jess McBride, founder and director of Open Silo. And this week I'm joined by Adrienne Wilson, chef and urban farmer, as well as the founder director of Feed Our Soul. Adrienne, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Jess. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's a pleasure.
Of course. I feel like I found Feed Our Soul somewhere in my internet searchings for urban agriculture projects and organizations. But then I feel like we really connected when I showed up for the coffee with the co-op at South LA Cafe. And we were both kind of like, wait, that's you. Oh, okay. Yeah, we need to talk.
We definitely had a connection. We did.
And then from there, we've collaborated on several different projects and sent people each other's way. And tell the viewers, what is Feed Our Soul in a nutshell?
Yes. So Feed Our Soul is a restorative organization. What we do is really focus on eradicating food insecurity on all levels, specifically when it comes to food access, and providing spaces and green spaces for community members to get fresh, local, homegrown food. And how we do that is through hydroponic gardening, as well as through educational workshops to teach you not only how to grow the food, but also how to cook it as well. That is the gap that I feel like most people suffer from, is where they want to eat healthy and they want to, figure out how to incorporate this into their daily lifestyle. And so I, created a program and a curriculum where it teaches you not only how to plant, how to grow, how to harvest, how to cook, but then also how to regenerate and reharvest so that you can really get that momentum of having that food constantly in your environment and in your daily habits. So that is what Feed Our Soul does in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, I love when programs incorporate the cooking along with the growing. Because it is, it does take that extra step a lot of times with a lot of vegetables, to get on the plate. And I think we sort of assume cooking is an innate skill for moms or whatever, it's oh, that's just something, it's not.
And that is so crazy just about the food system today. People make fun of millennials that they don't know how to cook. And even the generation after that, where they're just used to ordering on DoorDash or, going to be able to pick up something. That convenience factor has really, really, created such a disconnect between where our food comes from and where it's grown, and what actual vegetables look like wholly. And then also to how it gets to our plates and to our tables. And so, I feel like people think that, especially women, they're oh, once I become a mom, I'll just magically know how to cook. And it's just no, it takes years and years of practice to say oh, this is how I cook spinach, not overcook it, not undercook it, but this is how I like my spinach. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, and especially fresh vegetables. The deliciousness of fresh vegetables is something that takes skill to sort of bring out, either through grilling or roasting or doing other things, so you're not completely demolishing the vegetable before you eat it.
Right. And appreciating, I feel that flavor of a vegetable. Through my program, I really talk about, the changing of your palate. There's a deep science to what is happening on your tongue and your taste. Wow. And what you like. And scientists have manufacture that into the chips, into the soda, into the cravings. And so that is why we are programmed into wanting that junk food and not wanting fresh vegetables. So it literally is a reprogramming of your mouth to say, hey, oh, I'm craving some carrots and some hummus today. Oh, I'm craving an apple. I am figuring out how to replace those and reprogram your whole tongue is a whole different process. It's hard, but I think also for people to understand too, which I really like to instill upon them, is that vegetables can be flavorful. You don't have to not just boil them and then not put any seasoning on them. Like, if anything, I season my vegetables more than I season meat, like, because they need that. But I season them with other vegetables and herbs. That's what garlic is for. That's what thyme. That's what oregano. That's what lavender and rose water, like cucumber, mint. All of those beautiful things can create aromas and recipes that are just as satisfying in your mouth, as Doritos.
Oh, I just want to know, like, what is your origin story? Like, how did you come to, want to teach people how to grow and cook food? And then how did you kind of come up with the idea of like starting your own organization?
Yes. Oh man, it is a journey, but well, I'm from California. I'm born and raised in LA, and I love my home and I love these people here. But I did take some time to go off and travel the world and just really see and understand what the food system looked like and how people were getting their food. And I was really intrigued about it because when I started getting my degrees, I started at Carnegie Mellon with my bachelor's, and then I went to Georgetown and studied hospitality. But in that study, I was really looking at the food system and our supply chains in that system, and understanding and really deep diving into food insecurity, into food deserts, into food swamps, and the difference between those and how that affects our overall wellness and health. It affects our mental, physical, emotional, spiritual stability based on what we're putting into our bodies. And so when I started to understand that and started to look at the change that it can provide if you are installing a garden directly in an urban environment. So when I was in DC, I was working with DC Greens and DC Central Kitchen to put in and install gardens into the Ward 7, into Ward 8, where they only have one grocery store to feed 58,000 households. That's not even people, that's households. And they have one grocery store. One.
Not enough at all.
Not enough. Clearly.
Oh my
So, so I was working with organizations to install a garden there. And then I was working with youth and teaching them, and asking them questions about how they wanted to change, and they want to be healthy, but there wasn't any programs or any material out there to help them make that step, help them to slowly go and make permanent changes in their health. And so I just started from there. I moved back home because I was like, well, if this is happening in DC, it's happening in Chicago, it's happening in Louisiana, it's happening in Seattle, Detroit. It's also happening in Los Angeles. So I said, if I was going to do it, let's start at home first. So I came home and I started Feed Our Soul because I wanted it to impact our youth, most importantly, because the youth really kind of dictate what happens in the home. So if I can get a 7-year-old to say, Mommy, I want to buy more vegetables, please. Mom's gonna buy vegetables. and also she will learn how to cook those vegetables because she wants to feed her child. That's just a simple human instinct, right? And so helping and creating a system where they can do that and giving them opportunities to get produce to try out and taste is where we got started. And now it is blossomed and grown from there.
So would you work like one-on-one with families, or did you work in a school setting or after school setting?
Yeah, so I worked in a school setting. So I was working with the Augustus Hawkins High School and other LAUSD schools that are in Los Angeles County. And so we started off really just as a club. We started off as a garden club, and it was just whoever wanted to come came, and we had curriculums every single week where they learned how to grow their own food. So they watched it, I didn't. It was for them to really take accountability of something. It's for them to feel responsible for something. And when you see them really like pick out a carrot that they planted, it's incredible. They're like, wow, like I did this. I took care of something and I did something. It gives them a huge self-esteem boost. It gives them huge confidence. To also understand that they don't need to be a business person. They don't need to be the top of their class. Like there is a career in working with your hands and it's okay. It's not considered blue collar. It's actually considered a service need. We are essential workers because we need food in our communities. So yes, I started off in schools, and then I do individual workshops as well. Pre-COVID, we were doing workshops at churches and at community centers, as well as schools, just to spread awareness and get people just having the conversation.
I kind of feel like it would be, I want to be a fly on the wall at a high school where they have a garden club. Just knowing like I don't know, just even the status issues at high school where you're like trying to be cool and trying to like kind of establish your cred, and like then to like see that like transformation mentally of letting me like, oh my gosh, like this is very like gardening is cool.
Yes.
I just like can't imagine that, and like am very thrilled by that.
That was all I wanted, you know, and it was the best feeling when I like got a group of football players to come over and they're like, so what's going on over here? And I'm like, well, we're planting. Do you want to plant something? Like, come on, put your hands in some dirt, you know? And I think the best thing too, especially for you know, being a teenager is so hard right now. I don't even know how to do it. No. But just being able to be a face, to be a consistent face that like shows up. And, you know, some days I only had 3 people. Some days I had 20 people. You know, it just depends on their schedule and their moods, of course. But eventually it became something that was super consistent where they're like, oh, okay, actually I have garden club on Wednesdays. I gotta go. And it's like, great. And then you do get the jocks, and then you do get the bookworms, and then you do get, you know, I had a girl that was like so pretty and was a cheerleader, and she was over here talking about her broccoli, and I was like,
love it.
Love it. It's a converging of all types, and that is something that's the beauty of food to me. You know, it brings all people to the table, and kind of just creates a basis of humanity, like period. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. None of everything else matters. The point is that I want to eat healthy. I love my body and I love people, and I want to share that experience with you.
That's awesome. I can't imagine being in high school with Facebook, with Instagram, with Snapchat, all the things, whatever these kids are doing these days. You know, with, I mean, especially with Instagram where it's so image driven, it was hard enough not having that and being a high schooler. And then I just can't imagine the mental toll that is taking, especially on our women who are, it's so visually like pressured to look a certain way. And to then say like, you know what, let's get away from the mirrors, away from the phones. Let's like work with physical things, work with nature. That's a huge part of what gardening is like having to work with a natural system that you don't have full control of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that truly was a victory for me when I was like, if I can get them to put their phones down for 30 minutes and I have won.
Yeah.
And even doing the simple things just says, you know, let's just water it today. And that just became their favorite thing, just, you know, watering it, but also not with a power hose and just spraying things around, because that's not going to work. So it's putting it in your, you know, little container and basin and watering it gently and watching it grow. And we had a beautiful, we planted some milk thistle in the garden, and then we had all these caterpillars that came up, you know, in January and February. And so every week it was like, okay, let's find all the caterpillars. Like, let's make sure we didn't lose any this week, you know? And then it's like, oh, then they became the cocoon, that we were finding where their cocoons were. And then once we finally saw them hatch, right? And to watch them like literally come out and become butterflies and watch them fly away, that just 6-week process alone was so important, just for them to understand the cycle of nature, the cycle of life, you know, and how a plant could then bring in an ecosystem, which shows that it is functioning properly. And then that ecosystem contributes to the beauty of the world. You know, I love it.
That is fantastic. So I imagine the school stuff is not happening this year. Um, so you've pivoted to do more like food security work and food distribution, which I've gotten to see firsthand, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us some about that work.
Yes. So yes, as you said, since COVID and the schools shutting down, we were unable to access our gardens as of yet. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that will change one day soon. But we now really focus on bringing food to the people, right? So it's then again answering that question about access and how can we give them the best, most high quality food that they can when there's an epidemic and pandemic happening. And so when COVID was starting, so many people were having trouble. Some people were getting laid off. They weren't working. They couldn't get on food stamps. They were on unemployment. And I was just like, people are struggling right now. Like it doesn't need to be that hard. There is plenty of food around to go for everyone. And so you just have to figure out where it is. So I was able to partner with a couple of agencies, the Food Forward and the Social Justice Learning Institute, as well as Food Cycle LA. And they have programs where they glean food, where they pick up food that's either imperfect or it's not going to be sold, or, you know, it may be, you know, on the brink of expiration, but still could be good for a couple weeks. And then I harvest that food and I pick it up from all these different agencies and able to bring it to one central space for people to just come and pick whatever they want. And I feel have been so many agencies and organizations doing that lately, where they're creating a box and giving people essential goods. But we do it in kind of a farmer's market style, where you're able to come and just pick whatever you want, and you take as much as you want, because there are people that have multiple families. There are people that have neighbors that are single moms that can't have a chance to go to the grocery store. You don't know what people's situations are. So I don't put limits on the food that you can take, but it is first come, first serve. But we are working to get more food. I've been doing this since March now. So it has been a wonderful thing that happens every week at Norman O. Houston Park. They're really fulfilling because I get to connect with the community, and not only students, but also adults. I feel like we miss that sometimes, where people are like, oh, well, you're 18, you should be able to figure things out. But I have young women, young single women in their 30s, 40s and 50s, and even 70s. I have seniors coming in, they're just like, well, it's just little old me, so I just need a little bit of cucumber and need a little bit of cauliflower and some apples, and, you know, I'm good, you know? So just giving people what they need is the best thing that I like. And that's what we're doing right now. And hopefully we'll be able to move into more educational workshops later as time continues to go on. But for now, this is fulfilling, and it's fulfilling our mission in feeding the people.
It's really incredible. I came out one of the Fridays, and it was just such a joyful atmosphere. It was not at all a sort of shameful, you know, oh, like all the poor people come get your box that we've decided what to give you, you know, and it was so positive, and you were like outreaching to everybody at the park, not just people who are coming based on your advertisement. You know, it's like everyone is welcome. We're not going to ask you your income level or your need level. Like, you can determine that yourself. You know, be kind of relatively reasonable about the food you take for, you know, for the sake of everybody, not because we like don't trust you, but like we want to serve as many people as possible. And then the other thing I loved was that like people were like talking over the food about like, you know, oh, I got this last week and this is how I prepared it. Like I roasted it. Like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? Like you know, there was just this conversation that you honestly don't even experience in a grocery store.
Right.
Like, I think there was just such a joyful and trusting sensation there that I hope exists at you know, food hubs all over the city. And yeah, the LA Moss actually just launched a food hub program in Frogtown. And I'm really curious to look at that as well. And that's again like a weekly thing where it's just like, all right, it's open, you know, farmers market style, come get food that you need. And I just think we need more of those, you know, that are not kind of housed in a food pantry of like, oh, this is where you have to go when you can't really afford food, but that like this is like a community event that we're all celebrating. And like, you know, that I think people understand that this is a good thing instead of being like a shameful thing.
Yes, I agree. Taking the food shaming out of it, you know, it's like who am I to judge anyone and their situation right now? And really, it's a lot of like the middle class and lower class who are suffering as well, because you know, people who had kids that were going to schools, but now they have to feed 5 mouths, you know, 3 times a day. Like that puts a strain on your food budget because kids were eating at school. And so it doesn't matter what your, you know, economic status is. It's about, you know, if you have found where the food is, then obviously you need it. So I'm not going to ask you any more questions. I want to welcome you with open arms. I hope that you can maybe get a recipe out of this by talking to people. And I hope that you come again. You know, that's all that it is.
Yeah. And I want to talk about too, you know, you went through a journey of like learning about food insecurity through your education. I actually didn't even learn about food insecurity at school. And I was looking into the definition, and it is about, you know, people in our neighborhoods that cannot make ends meet to the point where they are going without meals. They are making the food stretch. They are going without food at all. And trying to like do their work, do their schooling without nutrition. And those people are in our neighborhoods. They're not in another country. And so that was a big wake up call for me, even post-graduate school, post-urban planning school, to learn about this term and to learn about this fact. And I feel like it's something where it's so silent and invisible. No one's like, haha, I can't afford food. It's me, you know.
Right.
It's really silent. And so I think the pandemic has, you know, one tiny good thing is that people are being educated about this. People are starting to experience food stress for the first time. Can I go to the grocery store? What's going on with our food system? Is there going to be enough? And you know, even if there is, that having that emotion for the first time, I think has like exposed people to the fact that like this is like daily life for a lot of our neighbors in Los Angeles. I've seen studies where they estimate 2 million individuals in our county of 10 million. And I've heard other, you know, like a study out of USC estimating that 1 out of 4 households in LA County are food insecure now because of the pandemic. So this is not a fringe thing. This is not something that is, you know, just we need a safety net for the very few that need this. This is pointing to some real shortfalls in our food system and how it's distributed. Because like you said, there's not a shortage of food. Like you go to the wholesale market down in downtown LA, there's a lot of food in our county. This should be like a really, really basic right that we say to our whole, you know, our whole group of us living together in LA County is like, listen, if you're here, like, we don't want you to go to bed hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and so I think organizations like Feed Our Soul, I feel like that's like the fuel for your work is like, we just don't want people to go to bed hungry.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a quote from from D Smoke. He's a rapper, musician, and a powerful lyricist. He said that someone came up to him and was like, "Have you ever had sleep for dinner?" And he was like, "Wow, I have had sleep for dinner." And and that's a concept that not a lot of people understand.
Yeah.
It's like where I am going to bed hungry, and so I'm just gonna shut down so that I don't have to worry about food, because I can't have anything till the morning because I only have breakfast. You know, and so, and you're exactly right. Like with the pandemic that's happening right now, I think more people are experiencing that just emotionally. So they're really starting to understand the disparity, you know, in all of the food in the food system, really. And like you said, there is so much food that is downtown, and that can be bought and purchased. I fully support farmers markets. I fully support, being able to use access and go to food pantries. But the way that it is then reprocessed from that, right? Because then restaurants are buying up all that food, and then they mark it up 3 times as much just because they're chopping it. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, if you learned how to chop, would you cook your own food? I think so. So it's creating that safe space for people to ask those questions, and for people to also explore. One thing that I love about the giveaways is that because it is free and we do have so many different varieties of vegetables and fruit, that people can try new things. If you have a budget of only $20, you're not going to spend 5 of those dollars on a bag of Brussels sprouts if you've never tasted Brussels sprouts.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. Yeah. You're going to buy the food that you need to buy.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because they're like, well, I'm on a budget. This is the food that I'm going to buy. This is what I'm used to. And that's how you stay in that loop. But when you're giving that food for free, and people are like, you know what, let me just try a handful of Brussels sprouts. I'm not even, if I don't like, let me just try. And I have seen such beautiful transformations with people just being able to try food for free. Yeah. And then expanding their palate. A gentleman came, his name is Henry, and he has never seen an eggplant or never eaten an eggplant in his life. This man is in his 60s. And I was like, just take an eggplant, chop it up just like how you would, saute it, throw some onions, some garlic on there, put it on the grill. You'll love it. Or maybe you won't. Let me know how it goes. He came back the next week and he was like, I cooked that eggplant for my family and they all loved it. All of them. All of them were like, what is this? I've never had it before. It's delicious. I want more. So now he comes every week looking for eggplant.
Things like eggplant and many vegetables are such a good conduit for flavors that you're used to getting in other products, bread products or meat products. One of my favorite things is buffalo cauliflower. You can still have that spicy flavor, that tangy flavor, but it's on a vegetable. Mm-hmm. And the cauliflower is like, yep, I can handle that. Let's do it. And
Let's do it.
It doesn't have to be meat or mm-hmm. flesh, that has that that salt and that fat that we crave, and I think too, I really hope, because a lot of this is cultural, right? Is what is your family eat? What do your friends eat? What do people on TV eat? What do celebrities eat? So it's all mixed in with that. And I really hope there is, that we are getting to a point where we're celebrating, in mainstream culture, the eating of vegetables as a high status thing, not mm-hmm. for the elite only, but just that you don't have to be embarrassed because you don't buy meat. Meat's expensive. should be expensive. That's like an animal that someone had to raise. Like, it should be expensive.
It should be.
It should be like, you know, if you eat meat, it should be like a special thing that's not every meal. And I think we've gotten used to being like, I want meat at every meal. That's what being a middle class person is about. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to sort of get away from that and celebrate, you know, vegetables by, you know, dressing them up and treating them well.
Yes. And I love, that you say that it is cultural, because it is. And I think when I was traveling around and going to different countries, that's when I really did see that it was a huge cultural change. You know, if you go to a restaurant in France or Japan, they call the American breakfast is sausage or bacon and eggs and or pancakes or potatoes. And it's like, okay, so this is what everyone thinks Americans eat, right? Compared to when, like, can I just have a fruit salad and some oatmeal? Yeah. That's what my body wants and needs.
Yeah, for sure.
Know? And it has become such a cultural thing too, with just like understanding the whole dairy industry and like milk and specifically cow's milk and how that doesn't work for everybody's system. But when we were raised, we were like, milk in the morning, drink your glass of milk because you need calcium and blah, 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 blah. But I became lactose intolerant when I was 8 years old. I haven't had milk since. I just can't. And so that is the point, right? Is to be able to explore food so that you can have the most healthy and efficient, productive life that you can. Not everyone's going to have the same recipe. Not everyone's going to be able to eat meat. I have friends who love meat, who can eat meat all day, and it's great for them. But I cannot, and that's just what my body is asking me to do. Yeah. And so I love to put this scenario in there where it's like you're thinking about this as a machine. You know, we take care of our cars, we take care of our phones, we take care of our laptops, but we like do not take care of the one thing that we cannot replace. No, it's not. I don't eat because I have to live. I live to eat because I love food and I love my body and I want it to be and work in the most efficient way that it can. And I also am giving it things that it enjoys. I love wine and I love chocolate. I can still consume those things and my body is okay. I cannot eat as much bread or pasta that I want to, but you know, we'll take things in stride, you know, pros and cons. And I love salty things too. And I feel like during the pandemic, I started getting into like nuts lately because they're naturally salty. And that's a lot of things that we use. That's nuts and peanuts and things are something that is an ingredient that we use in a lot of our food that we're not really seeing, and almonds as well. But that brings in the natural salt. So it's like, hey, let me make myself a trail mix. Let me just buy this trail mix. I know it's expensive. It's $6. It seems expensive for nuts, but it goes a long way. I only need a handful. And then I'm full because nuts are filled with protein. They're filled with vitamins. They filled with antioxidants, plus they give me the salt and crunch that I need during that craving. So, you know, it's exploring those things. And that's me. I didn't used to like nuts at all, but now I do. So it's about changing that palate, exploring that food process, and giving yourself freedom to see and understand. Just find what you like and your body will thank you for it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think trail mix is a great, and not like promoting trail mix, but just like the fact that like you found a salty snack, but it's like a real thing that you could like point to in nature to say like, this is where this berry comes from. This is where this nut comes from. They're like actual things. Whereas like a lot of our snack foods that are processed, they had to go through many steps and go to like this other shape where you're like, I don't know if I could replicate this. I don't even know exactly what's in here. It tastes great, but like, I don't really know what like powdered, you know, cheese puffs are like, you know, so I definitely think once you're mindful of like, how am I treating my body? Am I putting real things in it? You know, will change the way that you see food like on the shelves as well. What's on the horizon for you?
Exciting things, I really, again, just focusing on access, right? And closing that gap and closing that loophole. So we're focused on gaining land and getting space. And what my goal is to be a hydroponic farm in an urban environment. Like that's the key. Not only is it going to be eye-opening for community members of South Los Angeles, of Inglewood, of these Black and brown places and this youth, but also just to be able to give on a daily basis. I feel like I'm like, now 1 week is not enough. Like I want to do it every day. So creating a space where people can come and see food growing and seeing it growing with a little bit of help from technology and just having that conversation would be ideal. So I would love a little center, a little farm, just to produce, like 3,000 pounds of food, no biggie. And then really connecting that with a creative space, a creative kitchen, and really have a community hub where we're focused on food, we're focused on education, and we're focused on happiness and health. So that's where we're going. That's where we're looking. Land in LA is a whole thing in itself. Trying to find something, but I would love, looking to partner with organizations to put in rooftop gardens or put in community gardens, or being able to continue and get back to my educational and cooking workshops. That's the goal, and just to continue to spread awareness, continue to spread health and happiness, and feed the people.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, lots
I'll
of
be
work
keeping
to be
an eye
done.
out for land for you.
Thank you. And it really is getting into a really great place. I'm having wonderful conversations with a lot of foundations who want to help more, startups in this food space, and where I'm not just a restaurant. Yeah, of course, I would love if we could branch out to have a restaurant, and then there's a workforce and there's run by youth and teens. Like that would be my vision. But right now it's just about being able to pay property taxes and being able to pay my lease.
Yes. Yeah, no, I definitely think value of land in LA is a difficult challenge for a lot of people growing food, because you need space. You can't just be at a coffee shop and have a farm like in your backyard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's always that conundrum, and it really doesn't need to be so much of a conundrum, because people have land here that they want to save for the future, land banking, and they are sort of artificially driving up cost of land because of that. And they are, I feel like they are hoarding land, and our city does it as well. So I definitely, I think that, folks like you and I need to, be consistent in our voice to say, hey, City of LA, you own, this huge portfolio of land that belongs to all of us. Here's a beneficial use that we can have together. You can still own it if you want, but like there's work to be done, and you are doing nothing with this land. So I think that's something I'd love to see change, because there are folks like you who have the skills and the vision and the mission and the drive to do that, which obviously the holders of the land portfolio did not. So yeah, I would love to see that.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. And that is, I'm slightly grateful for the time of this pandemic, because I really am able to do all this research. Because at the end of the day, the city's looking into profit, right? They want commerce. They want, businesses. They want to be able to generate, income in our booming economy. So it's about looking into that deeper, into food entrepreneurship, and not just and as a supplier, right? And just opening up that supply chain and say, hey, we don't need any other restaurants. We don't need another taco truck. We don't need another organic vegan spot. What we need is lettuce. Plain and simple. So how can I not only be able to give that on a local level, but then also be able to feed and filter that into other restaurants, so then they can say and be proud to say, oh wow, we get our lettuce from a local farm that's in South LA, and they provide all of our fresh vegetables. That is something that I feel impacts a city on a massive scale, right? Where it's just that simple word of mouth, and that simple experience of tasting something delicious, and you're like, where did you say you got this from again? Oh, they're 5 miles away. Fantastic. Like, I'm gonna go and pick up my own batch of lettuce and bring this home. That's the connection that I want to see. That's the world I want to live in.
Totally. And that lettuce was never, sprayed. It was never like, it wasn't packaged and sent from miles and miles away. This was alive like a day ago or today.
Or today.
That kind of gap between like when the plant was living and when you're eating it is really important. And, we kind of just, I think we view it as an object sometimes, where it's like, this could last forever until it doesn't. But, it's like that, like having those nutrients, being part of a living plant so recently is, it's hard to describe unless you've ever tasted it and like experienced it. So
right.
I would love to see that. I think there's so many projects in LA that are, they grow food, but it's for a nonprofit. It's for like education, and all of that's awesome. But I think that, I was making a list last night of of farms that sell their produce directly to the public, and the list is short. I'd like to kind of have more projects be able to be part of the economy, right? Especially if you're like bringing kids up, looping back to that, bringing kids up to like have these skills and to like understand the awesomeness of growing food. But if you're cutting them off from that economic benefit and saying like, well, this is just for nonprofit work, like this is, this isn't part of the actual economy, then I think you're also kind of depriving people with those skills of like their place in the food system, as a whole.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's cutting out the middleman of the grocery store. Because that's really where a lot of the problems begin, is having, this barrier and blockade between the farmers and the people. And that is the grocery store. And at first they were smaller markets, right, where they were just feeding their neighborhoods, but then it's just become just such a massive commodity, and there are just these groups who hoard food and then put a value on it, because they're the only ones that have it. And then not allowing everyone to experience that food, and that is the sin, I feel, of grocery stores. So getting farmers to be able to get more B2C, just direct to consumer, would be game changing. It would be game changing.
And I think like the grocery store sort of takes that relationship out of it too, right? If I am going to a grocery store, I don't know any of those staff people. I might recognize them, but I don't really know them. I'm not in a relationship with them. So I'm getting I'm like picking up all those sales. Like I am like paying as little as I can, because I know myself and my family, and I want to do the best by my family. If you're shopping from Adrienne, you know her, you love her, you want her to succeed, you're not going to be bargaining her down to the lowest dollar price. Like you're going to say, hey, like whatever you say is worth it for you, that's what I want you to have. Also, here's a tip, And so I think that human relationship has always been a part of trade on a micro scale, when you're like at the market of your neighborhood, of your small village or whatever. And that's really taken out in our larger economy that is just transactional. So I think that business to consumer is I think going to be a really important part of revaluing food as well, and getting better food to people's plates.
Yes, and getting better food, and like cutting out the packaging. It's just like, ugh.
So true.
That is like an extra $1.50, people. If you don't know, please look it up.
Yeah,
Your food
bring your own
budget is
bags, put the greens in
70%
the bag,
packaging
fine.
that you throw away immediately when you get into your house. And the packaging is because, it's traveling so far. You have
Right.
to protect it, of course. All those things I understand why there's packaging. And now, food safety, right? And health risks and foodborne illnesses. I understand why packaging has become necessary, but it's mostly, again, in grocery stores. When you go to the farmer's market and you go to a farm, they just have potatoes strewn on a table and you just pick whichever one you want and you put it in your bag. And like, that's it. It doesn't need to have all the layers. It's like we're making things way more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah. I think too, the branding is part of that. Like people are like, well, they don't know what a vegetable is, so we have to brand it,
Yeah.
and we have to like brand ourselves as a business, and I think that again, that's like plays back into the transactional nature of that economy where, you don't have a personality because you're a huge corporation. So you have to make a personality through a brand, and so when you're just dealing with your neighbor, it's a whole other relationship that is way more healthy and way more resonant with the kinds of relationships we've had for ever since we've been humans. So
Yes. And it facilitates a sharing economy,
yes.
which I am more about, because there is excess. There's so much, extra, and there doesn't need to be. And if we just shared a little bit more, and we're just like, Crop Swap LA, where it's like, hey, I have a bunch of tomatoes and persimmons. You have, some herbs. Let's swap it out. I don't need all of this because, as we forget, food is perishable. It does have an end date. It will not last forever. So if you take the greed and ego out of yourself for just a moment and you're like, hey, do I need all of this? No, I only need about half of it. There's only so many recipes I know that can use this. Like, let me share it with my neighbor. And then it just automatically creates just a feeling of, oh, wow, I want to give you something too. Oh, you give me something there. I got this from my friend. Oh, my other friend has this. And it just creates just a better, more balanced lifestyle that I feel that we're striving for, but we're creating barriers where we can't achieve that because the powers that be know that if we did embrace this economy and this type of mindset, then there will be more equality.
Yeah, definitely.
They want to keep the layers. They want to keep the hierarchy. That's the thing. They want to keep it stacked instead of knocking it down and have every piece look the same.
Yeah. This has been incredible. I love your work so much, and you're just a hero in our community. And how can we like follow your work, support your work, all the things?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one, thank you so much. I love you. You're a gem, and I always love our conversations because we're always talking about the nitty gritty, and it makes me so happy for you spreading all this awareness and doing all the great things. And so if you want to check out Feed Our Soul, you can check us out online. Our website is www.feedoursoul.org. You can also follow us on all the socials, social media. Instagram is at Feed Our Soul, just straight across. Facebook is Feed Our Soul _LA.
Are you on Twitter? Is that a thing?
You know what? I am on Twitter, but I don't tweet. So I don't tweet, but I am on Twitter. We are on Twitter at Feed Our Soul as well. But I'm one day when I'm like, I will be able to like, maybe have a food truck or something, then I'll be on the Twitter. But I don't really tweet much. I don't really know what I would say on Twitter.
I know.
Besides, feed more people.
Yeah. Eat more plants.
People would get sick of me real quick.
I know. Well, this has been the Open Silo Garden Party, where we're talking to people in the urban ag community in LA. Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us. Lawnmower, thank you for joining us as well. Really appreciate your presence today. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Like I think that's like when like ideas burble.
Yeah,
Burble.
for sure.
You use that word. That's good.
Burble. I like that.